Come on up here, Dean. We're going to reset the stage. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to do a quick spiritual test. Let's see. This gentleman right here. Chris, what is your name?
Chris.
Please stand up, Chris. This is the super spiritual bell. Chris, would you give it a nice ring just showing how spiritual you are? Go ahead and give... Chris, maybe you're in a section that doesn't have super spiritual people. I'm so sorry. What is your name, sir?
Keith.
Keith, nice to see you. Ring the super spiritual bell, Keith. Please stand up if you would. Be bold and just ring the super spiritual bell. We're going to pray for Keith right now. No, I'm kidding. Let's see. Alan, stand up. I believe you can do it. Ring the super spiritual bell. You can do it, Alan. We believe in you. He gave it one try and it didn't work out so well. Maybe I'm in the wrong. Oh, looks like we're already set. Okay. What I just did is what's called in show business stalling. Okay. But we're going to keep things moving, friends. What a great evening. And to tell us a little bit more about how this next session is going to work, I'm going to invite two friends of mine to come up to the platform. We're going to invite Gilles, Gravelle, and John Lynn to come on up here. Gilles, hold on. Wait, there's more. There's more. Yeah, go ahead, guys. Get up there. Gilles is the Director of Research and Innovation at the Seed Company. John is President of Lind and Associates. They're going to tell us how we're going to dig deeper into these ministries. Why don't we welcome Gilles and John?
Thank you. Great to see you here tonight. So we just heard from 5 amazing ministries, some pretty heart-wrenching stories, but some exciting strategies how to overcome these difficult situations. What we'd like to do now is change a little bit, and we're going to invite, John and I are going to invite each ministry up, and we're going to have a kind of a conversation with them, but we have some questions that we've collected. So we want to get into the story a little bit more, understand a little bit more about what they do, how they do it, and so that's the venue for the next, or the plan for the next 40, 50 minutes or so. We're going to start off our conversation now with Jay Panther from Young Life Impacting Hearts. Jay, come on up.
Hey, buddy.
Hey. Am I on? All right.
So let's kick off a first question.
Thanks, John.
That was amazing, Jay. Something that, one question that came to mind was, foster kids are passed around all the time. A lot of times, from the time they're very small, older, higher grade, they're constantly passed around. When they connect with Young Life, how do you earn their trust? Or do they just see it as just another being passed around?
That's a great question. So we earn trust through consistency and continuing to show up where they are over time. And there's a natural relational cycle that we go through where we show up, and it varies a little bit, but for the most part, they're pretty hesitant of us. And then there's some relationship that starts to build as we keep showing up, and they start to trust, oh, maybe this is someone that's actually going to do what they say they're going to do. And then we get close enough to where we could actually hurt them if we pulled away out of relationship. And so they preemptively push us away, trying subconsciously, of course, to protect themselves. And then we fight through that. And eventually they start to give us their trust again. And sometimes that cycles over and over again. But we just keep showing up. That's the answer.
So how do you, with all the staff that you are going to have and the challenge that you've made to the Barnabas Group folks about expanding into the 500,000 around the country, how do you help your staff, hang in there and maybe avoid burnout? Because these kids have been through a lot.
Yeah, so Young Life actually has a great structure where there's all sorts of things in place where we have a mandatory day of solitude once a month. We take sabbatical. We have to be in counseling. We have to have accountability partners and discipleships. There's so much structure around us that the honest truth is probably 15 hours of my week is just my spiritual and self-development and health so that I can show up as my best self. And we demand that of the people that are going to do it because we're not interested in people running the race really fast for 3 years. So one of the things I always say is, at any given point, stop and say, can I keep doing what I'm doing for the next 30 years? And if not, then you need to make some changes so that the answer becomes yes.
You mentioned something about the importance of leaders that are peers, that are from the same culture, the same background, the same situation, and that seems significant. Can you take your time, tease that out, because there's something there that I think we need to understand better.
Yeah, so in some ways it's as simple as the beauty of the diversity in God's kingdom. Everybody's voice is necessary for us to understand the fullness of God's love. And in this specific situation, for a kid to see me who grew up in a family with traditional two parents, they can understand that I love them and there for them. But there is an immediate connection, a knownness, an understanding that happens naturally when they interact with someone that has lived the same life experience that they've lived. And that's something that God has wired into us, the desire to be known and understood and accepted exactly for who we are, right? That's what makes Jesus and God's love so beautiful. And so that's something that can only uniquely happen with kids that have shared the same experiences.
So when you're working with state municipalities, et cetera, working within the state system, court systems, all these types of things, what kind of relationship do you have to have with them in order to be successful?
Yeah, so I mentioned contact work, which is us going to where the kids are. Well, we do a lot of contact work in social services, and we are very intentional in building relationship with social workers and judges and therapists, all the people that are the gatekeepers, the frontline workers that are keeping these kids alive. We do all sorts of stuff for them because we want them to know that we're here for them and for their kids. And something I tell them all the time is, we're not here with an agenda other than to love you guys and to love these kids, and you can best guide us in that. So let us be a support, let us be a resource, and point the way. We're not attached to the method which we do things. We're attached to sharing Jesus with these kids. And so whatever that needs to look like, we're ready to turn on a dime to best meet those kids' needs. And the social workers see that. And that's part of the beauty of being a part of Young Life, which has been around for 75 years and is in 200 countries, is the name recognition gets us in the door, and then it's the consistent relationship that keeps us there.
You said something shocking, and I even heard the audience gasp when you said 80% of kids in foster care system end up in prison or drugs or issues, and sex trafficked kids, 80% foster kids. Are you sure about that?
I am.
That just sounds too crazy.
I am positive, and those are statistics that I'm sure Willow, some of those they could confirm. Those are numbers that I got directly from state websites and state workers. And so those numbers are very real. And the scary part is those numbers are very real here in our cities, in our county. Those 3,000 foster youth that live in the neighborhoods that you live in, that go to school with your kids and your grandkids, those kids are living the exact same statistics. They are literally tragedies waiting to happen if we don't step in and do something. It is inevitable, and it's been that way for years. And the answer is the church stepping up and doing something. It's the only answer.
That's remarkable. I think we have time for one more question. Not yet. Keep going. How long do they go? Now, it sounds like Young Life Impacting Hearts is a program, and you come into the program and you improve, hopefully, with your excellent staffing. What do they go, 2-3 years, and then do they go back out in the world? Are they all normal now and they just go functioning? What's the rest of their life like after Young Life experience?
Gosh, wouldn't that be simple if it was that neat? 2 years, you're out, you're good, and off to success? No. We are in it for a lifetime. We are here to build relationships that last a lifetime. That is the only answer. And so the truth is, our volunteer and retention rate is phenomenal because I impress the same thing on my volunteers that you heard is necessary for staff. They have to be healthy to show up for these kids. For the most part, the only transition that we see amongst volunteers outside of people moving or significant life changes is at some point they may not be available to come to the Monday night club every week. And so, or their kids that they have been in relationship with graduate from high school or college, whatever it is. And so we ceremoniously say, thank you. Now leave Young Life and continue on with the 2, 3, 4 relationships that you've built and spend whatever time you were giving to us with those kids for the rest of your life. And so when leaders sign up, I don't ask them for a year or 2-year commitment. I tell them that they're here to build lifelong relationships and that they're in those relationships as long as the kids will have them. And that's what they're saying yes to. That's what the commitment.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it. And we know that the Barnabas Group and how you've shared here before, and some of our Barnabas Group members have participated with you and on your committees and giving financially and prayerfully and engaging. We're very so proud of you. I mean, you're kind of one of our own, you know.
I just have to share this real quickly. I know that I've got a minute left.
Don't worry about him.
Okay, you guys need to hear this. So when we first came to Orange County 7 years ago, we presented at Barnabas, and our first board group came out of Barnabas. And then we had the opportunity to present at Barnabas again to expand what we were doing. And finally, we presented at the Shark Tank Barnabas, and that was a huge launching part for Young Life One, which is now creating this ministry nationwide. And so we're back here again to grow that. So in all sincerity, the birth of this ministry 7 years ago to this point, Barnabas has been an integral partner every step of the way with people volunteering, donating, on staff, everything. You guys have been remarkable. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of all the foster kids in Orange County. You guys have already made a huge, huge difference.
So you put up a big challenge there, but when you look at the size of the problem, it looks very doable, and it even looks like a bargain. So thank you for your time, and we're going to bring up the next guy. Thank you,
you
Jay.
guys so much. Thank you.
Our next guest is Eric Larson, New Covenant Missions. Eric, welcome back.
No, go ahead.
This is kind of nerve-wracking.
It's just us.
Just us. You know us very well by now. There's a lot to absorb from your presentation, especially if you're not used to the tension belt or detention zone or mission in that part of the world. It does seem like the hardest place, and no surprise, the last place. And you mentioned people like Nassar. So where do you get these people? I mean, they're champions. Did they just show up on your door? I mean, how do you find them?
You know, God has been so amazing to us. When me and my wife first stepped into mission work, God really just started bringing relationships forth into our lives. And that was back in 2007. Honestly, that's the easiest answer I have, is that there has been absolute divine networking on God's part. He saw our heart to go, and he's constantly brought people to us that have been goers with the same vision. On the other end, that has just exponentially multiplied. So, you know, we have our main leadership, our regional directors that are all African, and they also have had the same thing happen to them over time, of building relationships, of being leaders in their churches. So it's a network that just goes way back beyond and has deep roots and foundations. And as we continue to get resources, we continue to be able to bring out these gospel warriors from the reserves, so to speak.
So you're seeing that the Lord is preparing the hearts of these people even before you arrive at some of these.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So how do you help these folks when they're engaged with you in in a level that they're being, you know, church planting, et cetera, and they need to make a living? They might have had a living before doing this. How does that integrate with what they're doing as far as evangelism and church planting?
Yeah, I mean, to be truthful, I think one thing that's different about our ministry compared to a lot of ministries is that our 402 field workers, I mean, they are family. I can tell you the names of almost all of them. Chris just joined on board with us, and he's been getting to read the monthly reports and testimonies from every one of them. We have communications with them on a monthly, even more than that basis. And we've got WhatsApp feeds with like devotionals and stuff just going like crazy. It's so hard to keep up. So, once again, it comes down to that relationship thing where we've got our leaders, and they're all part of local churches. And so when it comes to a situation like with the Menning people for Patrick, where it's like, hey, how do we go reach them? Well, go recruit some people from your church. There's people in your church, I'm sure, that have been called, right? So, oh yeah, absolutely. Can we resource them? Absolutely. We'll resource their basic needs for rent for the house, for food, whatever it takes so that they can go in and get started. And then most of the time, to be a part of that community, they end up picking up a business for mission type tactic. And whatever that looks like, sometimes it's having a cell phone charging station in the middle of the community, and you charge everybody 25 cents to charge their phone while you talk to them about Jesus. So a little bit of income's coming in while they're doing the work. But the hardest thing for me sometimes is that we don't have a box. Every culture, every situation looks a little bit different, but God continually provides the wisdom of how to make it happen.
Getting back to the region again, I think we need to know a little bit more. That's a tough place. Could you just describe for us what the situation is like when one of the workers goes in for the first time to build relationships? What kind of life are they going to look at? What's the situation that they're going to confront from day one?
Yeah, we really have two different main scenarios. We have animism, which is traditional belief systems. They're worshiping ancestors. They're having blood ceremonies, real strange voodoo type stuff. And then we have Islam, which often, where we work in Africa, has a mixture of that with kind of radicalized Islam, if that makes sense. So one example would be, we sent one of our church planners, Burhanu, into a central region in Ethiopia, a very Muslim region actually. And when he first moved in, the whole entire community, he couldn't even figure out how to get a job because they already spotted him off as a Christian. So we're kind of thinking, gosh, what do we even do? And he's been trained in contextualized evangelism, so he knows the whole Quran and can share who Jesus is through the Quran and get the conversation started. So he's doing that one day, and it happens to be with Sheikh Abdullah, one of the imams of the local mosque. And Sheikh is listening to this and going, gosh, this kind of makes sense. Right? And he's like, because he knows his Quran, so he's looking back through it and then ends up coming back to Burhanu and saying, hey, talk to me more. We want to have more conversation. The relationships gets built. Sheikh Abdullah today has been a church planner for us for the last 3 years. Right? Now Sheikh Abdullah, unfortunately, was poisoned, lost most of his voice. He talks with a very scratchy voice. He was poisoned by one of the neighboring imams. His wife lost a child. She was pregnant while Sheikh Abdullah was up doing a baptism ceremony. People came in and beat her. It's not easy. But there's just something, I think, when you start to see the spiritual fruit that you can't stop.
That leads me to another question, if you don't mind, that builds on that. It's the question of attrition. So Western missionaries go to work in very difficult fields, and there's a higher attrition rate. We know. I mean, I've done the research. It's very hard. You bring your family. For a Westerner to work in those conditions, to learn the language, the culture, and then stay there, creates high attrition rate. But then we just heard what happened to the sheikh and his wife, and what's the attrition rate with these local culture, near culture workers?
Honestly, it's so minimal because most of them have given such a sacrifice to accept Jesus in the first place that it's the, which disciple said it, where would we go? I think it's Peter, right? I mean, I have a theology degree, but obviously it's not working right now. But it's where else would we go? And it just is that vision. Just like Patrick and his team moving to live in mud huts and get scabies and all that kind of stuff. And now they'll go somewhere else. And I often wonder, I'm like, gosh, shouldn't you guys take a break? I mean, I'm like, gosh, I want to go to Mexico or something. But it's amazing.
And what was the monthly cost, did you say, for training and equipping them?
Well, for training and equipping them, basically, the main support of a church planner full-time is about $200 per month in the region that we work in. Training and equipping, we throw in different projects throughout the year. With this specific project, we're looking at about doing 6 different trainings per year at around $40,000 to $60,000 to bring them together in different regions. And, I mean, it's one thing to do a training seminar and train people. It's a whole nother thing to bring tools, equip them, and then encourage them, pray with them, and let them know that we're all family in this together.
That's a relief. I was thinking you just gave them a bus ticket and sent them to the village and said, we'll see you later, let us know how it goes. But you actually spend a good deal of time resourcing them and equipping and training them so they have what they need. And that really affects attrition, I would imagine.
Absolutely. We're a big family. Like I said, I can't even tell you how many WhatsApp feeds I have from these guys talking all the time. And, one of our church planners, or our national directors actually in Mali, lost his mom last night, or the night before. And I knew the morning I woke up, so I'm talking with him and praying with him. And I'm the president, which, I think in most organizations that isn't totally typical. I don't know.
Well, Eric, we are so proud of you and your staff and your lovely wife, Spirit. And we know you're from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where we used to live. So we're so grateful for all of what you've done and what you're going to do and how we can engage with you. So let's give Eric a big hand. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Kelsey Morgan, come on back. Willow International, soon to be ever free.
So Kelsey,
Yes.
how you feeling?
To be honest, I've been sick all week, which
Yeah, well,
is why I have
she's not
my
been
tea.
feeling very well, but she's done a very good job. That she got her
Thank
tea,
you. Yes.
which is important. So one of the things I was curious about when I was listening was how do the girls find you? I mean, how do you engage with the people that you're working with on the ground, in country, to have them engage with you in the first place?
There are a few different ways that we do this work. The first is that trafficking is a networked problem that requires a networked solution. Traffickers figure out how to traffic people from rural villages to countries around the world, and so if we are to combat that, we have to be more collaborative and more networked. So we have over, I think, 40 active partnerships right now, collaborating, identifying victims, and getting them referred into services. We also strongly believe in sustainable rescue efforts. So we partner with an organization called the Human Trafficking Institute. It was founded by my good friend who just finished up his service as ambassador for trafficking in persons for the U.S. State Department. And we partner with them to train law enforcement and immigration officers and people working at the airport so that they can identify victims. They learn how to do the work, and that work continues even after we stop those trainings.
Oh, that's smart. So it's preventative. It's not just
It is preventative.
it's not just interceding or emergency. You're actually proactive, working with government to break apart the networks that are so good at what they do.
Exactly. The last training that we did, actually, I got such a cool report back that one of the prosecutors said, oh my goodness, all of these cases I've been misfiling. I need to go back, open up my case files. These are trafficking cases. And he wanted to go find the survivors of that to make sure that they got care.
Wow. That's amazing.
Thank you.
That's scale. You said something interesting. Modern slavery is the term you used. So a lot of us are not around that work that you do or that world. We probably have a lot of different views of what slavery is. What is modern slavery exactly? I mean, I just picture it as sex trafficking, essentially.
Yeah, so modern slavery, that's a term they actually use a lot in the UK and Australia. Their law defines it as modern slavery. Here in the US, it's the Human Trafficking Act. Human trafficking, like I said, 40.3 million people. That looks like forced labor, forced marriage, and commercial sexual exploitation. So it takes on a variety of forms. This can be forced or bonded labor, which is more like the traditional slavery that we're familiar with from our country. And then you have commercial sexual exploitation, which is forced prostitution. It's the commercial sexual abuse materials that are found online, so children being used to produce horrible materials that's on the internet. The Philippines, where we're now working, they work with a lot of survivors of that. It's called CSAM. And then forced marriage. And forced marriage is one that's really important to understand because we just had a case, actually, I read the case file. It was a 12-year-old girl who was forced to marry a 40-year-old man. And she was sold. She was actually sold to him as a bride. And often they're bounced around between man and man.
So when you work with these children, girls, what about the ongoing protection, after the care and all the things you lined out for us this evening? What happens, ongoing protection? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you heard me say a lot talking about lasting freedom, ensuring that survivors stay free forever. And I think this is one of the ways that the trafficking movement has honestly failed. And it's one of the issues that we have worked to address in our work. We know that it requires long-term care and support. And so one of the things that we focus on is building strong and supportive relationships in communities and families where the survivors are from. You heard me tell the story about Favor and Bright. Their mom was vulnerable. If we sent them back to her living in poverty, those girls would have ended up re-victimized because they're desperate. They don't have options. They're easily betrayed and coerced. And so we wrap around the families. Our counselors go into families and communities, and they identify what those vulnerabilities, and they work together with the families. I mean, this is really the way that things are done in the rest of the world. We just don't learn these things here in the US, and I've had the privilege of working with amazing, amazing leaders who have taught us how to do this work. And as a result, I don't think I mentioned this, we have above a 95% success rate in preventing any re-victimization. And yeah, it's that commitment to long-term care and ensuring that there's supportive relationships. We also have a survivor support group. So any survivor, whether they were in our program 6 years ago or a week ago, they can come back for peer-to-peer support. And that is so key.
Yeah, you've kind of answered the next question, but I think we need a little more elaboration on it. So I'm not asking you to throw other organizations under the bus, per se. However, we do know there are a lot of organizations work in human trafficking, modern slavery, and a lot of organizations have different ways of approaching it. How is Willow International and soon to be Everfree different from the others that you've observed? You touched on it just now with the high success rate, but what is it that they're not doing that you're doing that they should be doing?
Oh, you know I love this question, Gil. I am so excited about this question. So,
And you got 60 seconds, all right? No, I'm just kidding.
All right.
I'm just kidding.
all right, so, we have a gap. We have these huge, huge organizations working with, they're like a big ship. When you try to steer a big ship, they're big, but they move a little slower, and it costs a lot of money to run them. Then you have small grassroots, local organizations around the world who are passionate, who know their context, who know the needs and the vulnerabilities of their communities, but those two groups don't often meet. They're not at the same conferences, they're not speaking at the same events, and so there's a disconnect. And so we said, what if we bridge that disconnect? What if we bring the resources and the best practices and the quality of care that we have built, And we take that to these local grassroots organizations and empower them to do the work, empower them to join our Everfree community so that we can reach more and more women and girls. And we'll do so cost effectively. We don't have to spend millions on research and development, which we know gets spent. Look at these huge international programs. We can go in and work with the people who have the research and development in their minds already. And so we believe that's what sets us apart. The other thing I'll mention is that we are singularly focused on this 1% problem. There are 1% of girls, less than that, accessing care. And so we're not going to promise to do everything, but we will partner with those who are necessary, like our work with the Human Trafficking Institute. We partner so that we can be more effective.
And that's what the focus is, kind of what you're talking about in this particular case, right?
Exactly.
Right,
Yep.
that's
Our
great.
key focus is reaching these women and girls and ensuring lasting freedom.
And then that's why we think that a lot of what you shared tonight as far as the investment in Everfree is going to produce the kind of things you're on the 10,000 goal in 10 years. It's that 1%. It's that piece of the pie is the kind of the tipping point to be able to help more and more children.
Exactly. And it really is. I mean, $9 million to be in 11 hotspot locations around the world.
Right.
And if we have more, we can do even more than reach 10,000 survivors. This model, it's replicable, it's scalable.
That's great. And we want to thank you, Kelsey, for being a part of this, and we're so proud of you. And where's our partner, your new
Jeremy.
Jeremy? Where's Jeremy back there?
Jeremy's
Jeremy,
our
stand
new
up.
CEO.
Jeremy's back there. He's the partnership in this. So we're grateful for all of what you do, Jeremy, of all what you're doing. And we just pray that, us in the Barnabas Group can be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right.
Mike Jackson, Reach the Rest. Come and chat a little bit more about how you're going to reach the rest. So, similar to Eric,
Yeah.
you're working in a very tense place.
Yep.
And would you just elaborate a little bit more? Eric talked about it. He gave some examples of what's going on in these villages when these heroic workers come in to start building relationships, establishing the church. I mean, they're confronted with physical, serious, and deep, dark spiritual issues. And what's your experience with your workers? Are they saying the same thing? What's going on in their world?
Yeah, so much of what we do is in the Middle East as well as South Asia and Africa, so that's a wide swath of territory. So if you talk about northern Iraq, how many people know northern Iraq? Kurdistan, northern Iraq. Us that are older, Gilles, talk about the northern no-fly zone back in the day when the Brits and the Americans would patrol that northern no-fly zone trying to get Saddam not to gas the Kurds, right? So that's a very turbulent area, obviously. So the last 4 or 5 years, you have ISIS coming in from Syria into northern Iraq. So the people are very skittish about persecution. So when anything new is interjected into that culture of that society, they're skeptical. But the thing that happens is because they're looking for something, they really listen when somebody nearby to them that's a believer comes into that environment. So it's less resistant in many ways when it's not an outsider coming in. Still hard, but it's better than it could be.
You talked about, in your presentation, about these, what you call them movement makers.
Yeah.
That was intriguing to me.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know a little bit more about these movement makers. How do you find them? Where do they come from?
Yeah,
if
Kelsey.
they're in this tension belt.
Yeah, Kelsey talked about it, right? So you talk about networks and relationships. You just look back on the last 20 or 25 years and you partner, you network with people that are like-minded, trying to find the same type of persons. So once you have some movement going, John, you begin to birth or find people in that network coming out of that movement already, that they'll become the new movement leaders. So whether it's South Asia, whether it's Africa, whether it's the Middle East, The last 20 years has seen such, again, a movement of people that we're just reaching out to those people, looking at who's identified that can be a large leader, a movement leader, a level 5 leader, we call them.
How do you measure movement?
Yeah, so movement for us is 1,000 churches, 5 years, self-replicating on their own, theologically and financially. That's a simple definition. Yeah. So, we measure things in generational mapping. If you've seen some of that stuff, you've seen charts that are handwritten. Well, now all the large mission agencies and even people that are smaller like us are participating together to dump data into a program in a very secure way. So now there's 4 or 5 million house churches around the world that are now networked into a database that we call generational mapping or tracking for 2 reasons. Number one, to see the health of that as we can see the movements develop, but also try to figure out where the gaps are, where the gospel's not.
So you talk about that. One of the things I'm interested in is the technology. How does technology, or does technology play any part of this as you begin to scale and grow?
Yeah, so for us in America, thus around the world, certainly with the pandemic, it's been a conversation about how do you pivot, right? So many of these places around the world 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would not have had the capability to use even Wi-Fi, much less cell service. So many people in northern India where the gospel is exploding, in the Middle East where it's exploding, they have access to some technology in the larger environments where they can do things live. But then many people we partner with that just simply do this stuff really well, we're able to package training materials into units, et cetera, drones, et cetera, a lot of stuff confidential, where you can deliver that material to the end user, where before you would have had to go there. But technology just helps in a large way.
This is a little bit of a different question. It sounds like a rhetorical question, but it's probably a real question. Did you ever have a big setback?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And
yeah.
what happened, and what did you do because of it?
Yeah, so, we move a lot of Word of God product in concert with other organizations into places that need the Word of God. So every once in a while you have people get greedy, right? So we do a lot of really good tracking with things like when Delta tracks your bags, you can do that type of thing. And we just found out that some people were not being honest. Wasn't a lot of money, it wasn't a lot of product, but the system by the nationals took care of it, okay? They're the ones that cared about it, not that we didn't. So they fixed it, they just replaced people. It was a setback, yeah. Cost us some reputation with some networks.
But you're saying that the nationals identified the situation,
Yeah,
they
for
stepped
sure.
in,
Yeah,
and they dealt with it to get back on track.
for sure, that's what happened.
They didn't look to somebody else to rescue it and fix
They just
things.
dealt with it, yeah.
So that still speaks volumes about the role of nationals and missions, the capabilities they have to solve the problems. Because I've heard over the years, I've been in missions for a long time, that people are a little reticent about supporting nationals because they're unsure about their accounting systems.
Yeah.
Accountability, is it really going to be used for what it said it's going to be used for? What's been your experience in that area?
Yeah, so that's obviously a big topic, the topic of dependability, dependency, accountability. What do you measure? So we measure what matters, right? We measure souls, we measure money, we measure transparency, we measure training. For us, it's been an evolution. And if I told you we don't make mistakes, I'd be lying to you, right? We've been doing this for 20 years, and we've not made every mistake, but we'll make another one tomorrow maybe. But we just try to figure it out. We're really like-minded with other organizations, and I can't stress that enough when it comes to the national conversation. And I said it earlier, as honest as I could, that you just have to work well with others. I mean, Eric's a great example. Okay, I met Eric, 2 years ago. Honestly, Eric does 10 things really, really good, and we do 1 or 2 things really, really good. I mean, he's really good in Africa, and he has strong nationals, okay? We do some other things Eric might not do as well, but he does really well on his own, right? But the whole subject of nationals, take this statistic, for example, to stress to you the importance of nationals and how much we trust them. If you think with me about 2,000 years of Christian history, we can talk about pre-Christ, I get that. But if you talk about 2,000 years of Christian history and the effect that we in the West, now the global South, now the global East have had, in the last 1% of Christian history, 20 years, this century, okay? In the last 20 years, 1% of Christian history, the people that were alive in 2000 that have not heard the gospel message, 60% of those people have heard the gospel message in the last 1% of Christian history. That's all done by nationals. All's a strong word, not all, you get it. But the point is, prior to that, it was a lot of us from the West or the South and the East, right? And there's a lot of our Asian brothers here that push the gospel hard. Point is that the nationals are owning it now, right? Paul Eshelman, those people, Ralph Winter, that paved the way for the conversation we're having tonight about partnering with nationals. They have the same Bible. They have the same Holy Spirit. It's been a struggle for me being overseas for 40 years to not look down, right? But to look up, not even across the table at them, but to look up to them. They own this thing. They're owning it. They're going to finish the task, amen? But we have our role, amen? We have our role. Instead of us getting to be the tip of the spear, if you will, it's the lady sitting over here that are the tip of the spear, and we get to hold the spear, resource, train, encourage, cheer them on, because they really want this thing to be finished.
So the same question I asked Eric, just remind us, what does it cost to train a national?
Yeah, so we're at $270 per person per year. Yeah.
Say
For
that?
church, $270 per month, sorry. $270 per month. And we typically support for 3 years. That might go up or down a little bit, but that's just a barometer for us, is 3 years. These movement guys, they tend to be full-time employees probably till Jesus comes. And training is the fulcrum point for us.
So do you want to finish the mission task for $270 a month in
For a
the
church
hardest
planter.
mission field on earth? I think that's a bargain.
Yeah, I think it's a really good bargain, and they do a really good job.
Thank you so much, Mike, for
Yeah,
your
thank
time. And finally, last certainly not least, is Sean Dunn, Groundwire. Sean, come on up.
Hey, can you get a little more excited, Sean?
I don't know if
Come
I
on,
have the
man.
ability. I feel bad because I feel like some of these people have been really respecting everybody, and they need a bathroom break, and they're just respecting everybody. So appreciate
We're going to go
that.
really quick. No,
Yeah.
I just kidding. So give us a little understanding about what it's like to volunteer, like be on the other side of that phone call when that girl calls or that guy calls and they've seen JesusSaves.com. What's it going to take to get more of those, or what? Tell us a little bit about that side of the phone.
Well, it is exhilarating and terrifying all at the same time. Because you have no idea what you're going to be asked. There's no way to prepare for it. You just know. But here's what I say. We believe as Christians that we can speak the very words of God, that we can have the mind of Christ, that we can have wisdom if we ask. But we as human beings, we never want to put ourselves in a position where we have to rely on anything other than our own wisdom and experience. And when you're doing this, you have to step out. And it's exhilarating. I read a chat the other day that reminded me of one of my first chats where the young lady logged in and she was suicidal. And she was looking for permission to take her life. And it reminded me of the first several chats. By the way, it's not on the phone because millennials don't pick up the phone and put it to their ear. They pick it up and wear it out with their thumbs. And so it's all text instant message. It's the language that they prefer. You might not, but they do. And so this, it was a young lady named Cammie was our new volunteer. It was her very first chat, and she had a suicidal chatter. And you could just, it reminded me of the tension that I had when I'm like, I don't want to screw up, don't want to say the wrong thing. God, I need you to break through. And I just saw this dialogue going back and forth. And this young lady named Samantha was saying to Cammie, nobody loves me. I just don't want to do this. I grew up in the church. I just don't care. She just wanted somebody to give her permission to die. And Cammie wasn't going to give up on her. And literally 30 or 45 minutes later, God broke through. It wasn't Cammie, and Cammie knew it. But I remember as it changed as Cammie said, hey, let me ask you, when you went back to when you were going to church, did you really, really believe that God loved you? Did you really believe that God could save you and forgive you? Did you really believe that? And at first, Samantha's like, you know what? I don't even want to talk about this God thing, even though it's at JesusCares.com. You know, you chose the conversation. But eventually, for some reason, Samantha, it was just like the Holy Spirit just spoke. And in that moment, she said, I did believe that. I remember what his presence felt like. I remember what his love felt like in my life. And a light went on, and just the conversation changed instantly. And she went from being suicidal to wanting to give her life to Christ. And she said on the chat, she said, I realized I blamed God for running away from me, but I'm the one who ran away from him. So you just got to love when you see those things happen. But it really is. Here's what it's like. It's like street witnessing. The difference is they tap you on the shoulder. They want to start a conversation with you because they saw a commercial that said, when life hurts, Jesus cares. Does he really care about me? Wouldn't you love to have those conversations with people?
You said in your presentation that you interrupt.
Yes.
Could you unpack that a little more for us? It went by pretty fast, but I mean, what does that mean? Why is it important to interrupt somebody? Couldn't you just be polite and wait for an opportunity to, chime in?
Are politicians polite? See, the most powerful marketing principle in the world is found in the Bible. Faith comes by hearing. And we think it's only about God, but it's about anything. Any agenda, any product, faith comes, the more we hear it, the more we believe it. And the problem is we've taken the most powerful message in the world and relegated it to a building. When it's the people outside the building that need to know it the most. And so we don't wait for them to come to us because they might never come to us. We go after them. We interrupt them. And yeah, it's an aggressive term, but it's a very true term because they're not looking for us. They're trying to entertain themselves. But in the midst of that, it provides an opportunity for us to kind of, tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, have you ever thought about God? You ever thought about the fact he's thinking about you right now? That he's the one who holds the answer to every problem that you have. And that's the interruption that we're talking about.
So it's like a commercial interruption. They're just
right.
going through and suddenly
Yep.
they see commercial after commercial, then they stop. Something
Right.
grabs their attention.
Yeah, the key by the way, the key to our interruptions it's not about theology, it's about crisis. I have a challenge for you. If those of you who are want to do a social experiment, I challenge you to go find 10 people tomorrow and walk up to them and just randomly say to them, would you like to have a theological discussion with me? And see how many friends you make. But here's what I challenge you to do. The next time, go to 10 different people and say, hey, life's been hard, isn't it? It's been a rough couple years. You want to talk about that? You'll make some friends. That's really what the content is about. It's about getting behind their mask and acknowledging the pain that they're experiencing and then suggesting Jesus as the answer and then inviting them into a conversation about it. And it works. It works. It is. I had a young guy in, I say young, he was 32 years old, business owner. I was in Houston with a bunch of older gentlemen who really didn't get it. One of the guys kind of said, hey, I don't get it. You just showed me a commercial with a girl crying. It would not have spoken to me. I don't see how this works. 32-year-old guy, here's what he said. He said, let me tell you about my generation. We live our best lives on our social media. He said, we put our best meals on there, our best hair days, our best outfits, our best vacations, our best dates. He said, we would never get on social media and tell you that we were having a rough day. But when we see it come across, and it's how we feel, but we would never expose it, it grabs our attention. He said, that's why it works. Because it's how we feel, but we would never acknowledge that.
Let's get in a little more about process, the nuts and bolts. I mean, you interrupt them, get their attention, you're engaging them now. They want to engage with you. What does the rest of that journey look like?
Story's best way to tell it. Young guy named Preston, 13 years old. He logged in and he said, hey, I saw this commercial, and he said, I have questions. He didn't have spiritual questions. By the way, more people come online and ask us, can Jesus help me, than can Jesus save me? If you're trying to help your kids, grandkids, neighbors understand Jesus, understand they're asking, how can he help me right now? Not how can he save me? They're not thinking, oh no, I'm going to hell. They're thinking, oh no, I'm going through hell. You meet them in that moment and it helps them. Preston said, hey, here's my issue. My parents are fighting. I'm afraid they're going to get divorced. I'm 13 years old. How do I help them? A lot of pressure for a 13-year-old kid to carry. He's instantly connected to Chris. Chris is one of our amazing volunteers. He actually lives in Mexico, but he ministers up here. They talk. He gives them a few tips, and then he ends up praying for him. And Preston was very open. And then at the end of the conversation, he answered his question, and then he turned the corner and he said, hey, do you have any spiritual questions? And Preston said, you know what, I do. I've never been able to ask anybody. So he ends up asking some questions about Jesus and ends up giving his life to Christ. Chris said, hey, praise God. I just want you to know I'm supporting you. We need to connect you to a local church. And Preston says, yeah, that's not going to happen. He said, my dad will not let me go to church. Chris says, I'm going to pray that God opens a door for you to go to church. About a month later, he emails Chris through his Groundwire email account, and he said, you're never going to guess what, you're never going to believe what happened. I was out on the lacrosse field, and one of my friends said, hey, I'm a Christian. You too? You want to come to youth group? Preston said, my dad won't let me go, but I'll ask him. Dad said I can go. Emails Chris a month later, I'm loving church. I'm getting baptized next month. Emails a month later, said, I have never seen my dad in church, and I've never seen him cry. He said, I got baptized. My mom, my dad, my brother, and my sister were in the second row. And he said, when I came out of the water, my dad came up and gave me a big hug. A month later, he emails me. He said, today I sat in the second row as my dad, my mom, my brother, and my sister all got baptized. Dad took them home and sat the kids down and said, listen, I realize it's been a war zone here. He said, we don't know what we're doing, but we're going to try and make this a home that God is honored in. I mean, it's powerful what God can do. I've actually had people tell me this is not real ministry. And my response to him is, then Amazon is not a real business. and eHarmony should never work. This works. I don't know why. God's the one kind of leading, but it's pretty amazing to watch it happen.
Great. Sean, thanks so much. Total impact. We're so appreciative of you and the work you're doing and the team you've put together. And we're just so grateful. Thanks so very much.
Thank you.
Let's keep that applause going for these interviewers, John and Gil, and all the ministry leaders. Yes.